This is one of our series of webinars on using BizInt smart charts for different purposes. Today's webinar is on creating hit structure reports using BizInt smart charts for patents. The most recent release, version 4.8, which we announced and presented at the PIEG conference in Alexandria earlier this month. So I'm going to go through a number of steps. First, we want to talk about what it is that we are doing with hit structures in our software, describe how to import transcripts from the various STN platforms, show you how to build reports of hit structures in reference rows, talk a little bit about some summary record tips and tricks, where we're going to be going with this, and then at the end, we will have time for questions. So this is the basic display that we're building, and what you see here is from new STN. This was the first platform that we supported. And at the top, you see bibliographic information, basic information that you've selected from your CA references, and below that, a display of each of the hit structures. So this corresponds fairly well to what you're seeing in your transcript, just presented slightly differently. Here's the same set of records coming from classic STN. This was created with STN Express, and the same coming from STN Next. And all three platforms are supported in version 4.8. So this is the basic display that we do, but the project that this was developed, that we developed this capability for, was trying to reproduce a macro that was developed by CAS and one of our customers. And basically, this is inverting that display. So taking each structure that appears in an index term, placing it in an index with links then to the references down below. So you can see each substance has a single line. We have the structures, and then that may be multiple structures. You may see annotations, stereochemistry, double bond, and so forth. Here we have a mixture of a couple of components, so you see those annotations. And then you see links to each of the references associated with the note from those index terms. So what are we doing? First thing is obviously that we're importing hit structures from CA+. It is only available in what we call our summary records export. And I'll talk a little bit more about this and some of the options later. But essentially, this is taking your table and turning it into what some of our users call note cards. There's a hit structure display at each CA+ reference, and then an option to have an index with links to those references. And if you don't want to see the hit structures reproduced at each of the references, but you would still like to have linkage back and forth to the index, you can include just the index terms, and each RN will then be each registry number will then be a link back to the index. A couple of things we're not doing. This is currently not available in the main table, predominantly because of space concerns and trying to come up with a good way to do this. Do this concisely. It's not available in other export formats, but that really is only a matter of time and getting it implemented once we've worked out all of the issues. And as I say, it's not available in this format yet. We're just trying to decide what that implementation is going to look like. So importing a transcript is actually fairly straightforward for most of the platforms. STN Next is probably the most difficult. When you do a structure search on, new STN rather is the most difficult. When you do a structure search on new STN, it's very important that you keep both the registry and CA+ references together in your exported XML. It's not the easiest thing to do. It's very easy to limit a search and all of a sudden no longer be able to get to the associated registry records. The instructions for how to do that are available on our website. if you go to the creating reports from databases and hosts section. The second issue with new STN is that there is a limit of 500 records in an export. And that's not 500 CA references plus registry. That's actually 500 total of your CA references and your registry records. So a typical set of a few dozen up to maybe 100 records is fairly easy to meet within those requirements, but you can very quickly run into that 500 record limit. More recently, we've added support for both Classic STN and STN Next. On Classic STN, it's actually really easy. If you take your existing transcript where you've displayed in bib, abs, hitster, or max hitster, something like this, you can simply take your transcript in STN and Express, save it as an RTF file, and import it. And that is, it's mostly foolproof. There's one important trick to keep in mind, though, is that the RTF that is generated by STN Express is a fairly particular, regular, easy to interpret format. By default, that will open up in Microsoft Word. And if that happens, you do not want to save the file. You just want to close it. If you save the file in Word, Word restructures the text. And while it's still RTF, the underlying structure of the document changes, in particular the structure of the structure images themselves. So if the transcript opens up in Word, do not save it, just close. It'll be sitting there on your disk, and you can import that RTF file. STN Next is fairly straightforward. Again, you can just display and include hitster in your display format. The only important step is to remember to turn off enhanced display. This is the rich presentation option that's available on STN Next, and then save your transcript as an RTF. And typically your web browser won't open that in Word, so that should be fine. You'll be able to import that file right away. So to import that file, if you're on new STN, the file is downloaded as a BPD file. It will launch automatically in BizInt Smart Charts if you ask it to. But if you have an RTF file, if you double click on an RTF file, it's going to open in Microsoft Word or WordPad. So you can import that RTF file in a couple of ways. The more difficult way is to go File, Import, find your transcript directory and import that. An easier way is to simply drag that transcript file, that RTF file, into BizInt Smart Charts for patents. The software will tell you what it's found in that document. In this case, it's found 3 records from CA. And then let you choose a chart template. And a chart template is just an initial presentation of the columns. You can create your own, and we recommend that you do. This is just a set that comes with the default installation of BizInt Smart Charts for patents. Creating your own template's very easy. You can go View Columns, and on the left-hand side, you have a list of available columns that you can add to the displayed columns, or you can remove columns, move them to the left, rearrange them by dragging and dropping or by clicking the up and down arrows. And then once this is done, you can save that as a template. There's a couple of other things that you could do before you save as a template. One of those is you can set properties on some of the columns. So if, for example, if you have non-patent literature, you could set link properties so that DOI links are sent to, or turned into, DOIs are turned into active hyperlinks, or to link publication numbers in the patent family or other columns that contain publication numbers to full text sources on a number of different platforms. So I typically send my US publications to the USPTO, EPs to ESPOSNet, PCTs to PatentScope just as a demonstration. So when you do this, you have a chart that looks like every BizInt Smart Charts report that you've seen over the years. But to see the hit structures, you need to go one step further. So you say File, Export, and One of the options there you see is Word summary records. And this is a new format that we developed for one of our customers a couple of years ago for reporting to their attorneys, but it also turns out to be a convenient place to put things like an index. And what you get is a panel with a bunch of different options, a bunch of different checkboxes. And I'm going to go through these different options here. Really quickly, up at the top there, you can put numbering on the different records so you can refer to them. You can have each record start on a new page, which makes a really nice little note cards document. You can have an editable notes section and so forth. But I'm going to talk about these the other features here, starting at the index of hit structures. So the first option is the index of hit structures. And what this does is basically, if you have hit structures present, it turns on, it builds this index at the top of your document. Each substance is, as I said, is numbered, identified. You have the structure drawings and the links. If there are no hit structures captured in your transcript, this will be grayed out. You won't see the option. The second option, which I described right at the beginning, is the hit structure display in each CA reference itself. This is, you can see the little arrow there on the left, the include hit structures option. So you can have this on or off. And then index terms, which is the last option on the dialog right now. And again, these options will only be present if you have hit structure data available in the chart. And here you see what the index terms look like. So it's basically a representation of the index terms that came in the transcript, the IT paragraph. But after each publication, after each registry number is compound X and the link back to that compound in the table, in the index of hit structures. So this makes a very, very compact report. So all of this is showing you basically a way of taking your existing transcript and basically manipulating it into a presentation that's very similar to what you might see coming out of STN Express with a little bit of elbow grease. But we can do something a little bit more interesting than that using BizInt Smart Charts reference rows. Now, reference rows is a utility that lets you combine multiple records from the same family into one row. Basically, anytime we find records that have the same common family, that is a publication number in common between different records, we link those. And then through rules or various manipulations, allow you to display that just as a single entity. So all the records on the same patent representing the same family come out as a single row. This is an example that we did last year. We've showed a couple times at PIUG that explains the concept of what we're doing. We're taking multiple records, some from the Drone World Patents Index, some gene sequence data, PatBase, Orbit's FAMPat, and we're picking and choosing data related to the same family. So we see family titles coming from the Derwent Enhanced Titles. Families chosen to be the biggest family. We're saying give us the most comprehensive family, so we're getting PAT-based families in this particular case. Moving across, we're looking at some unique content. We're fusing unique content from certain databases together. So from FAMPat, we can get the family status. This is a summary of the ACT field, sort of top-line data. We can bring that in for each of the families. We can bring in the probable assignee from PatBase. Again, unique content from the different databases being fused into this same row. And then here off to the right, where we have data elements that are repeated for where there's multiple data elements within a family. In this case, these are sequence hits. We can summarize the information of what was the quality of the hit, the percent identity, the length of the alignment, and where was that found in the members of the family. So you could take various components from databases on STN. So you could go to Orbit, PatBase, various Clarivate products, LexisNexis, and GQ Life Sciences. So when we're looking at hit structures, what can we do with reference rows? Well, one of the first things that we do is taking the claims from another database. And so this could be if you transferred your results from CA Plus to EP full or US full or PCT full or something like that, you could grab your claims from there. In the example I'm about to show you here, we went to PatBase. So we transferred the publication numbers from CA Plus to PatBase, took those results. So now we have 3 families from chemical abstracts, 3 families from PatBase. Went to File Combine to combine those together. And when we've combined the charts, we send them off to reference rows. And in order to do that, we need to be able to link in order to go reference rows, we need to be able to link the records from different families together. That's a step you could do in BizInt Smart Charts for patents, but I chose not to. When I got to reference rows, the wizard asked me, do I want to generate that linkage? And I click yes. I click generate. And now I'm in reference rows. And so I picked some columns, and when I went to export summary records, and the dialog looks just the same, there's an include claims checkbox that it's on. And now for every row, we happen to have claims and hit structures available. So if that claims option is turned on, there'll be a list of the full claims set for this family coming from one publication in this family. And then a little bit later, the hit structures for that family. So it's a way of linking 2 pieces of data together. Another way you could do this is with gene sequence data. So I started with a sequence search and in Genome Quest. And so I had a number of sequence hits related to that I happened to know I would also be able to find a small molecule version of. So I found I did the corresponding search in CA Plus, doing a structure search. So basically finding the biologic through a structure as opposed to finding it through a sequence search. Both of these results brought together. And I could do this in reference rows, to dedupe, so I could have both sets, but also to combine that data. I can see here that I have a number of instances of this particular sequence appearing in my sequence summary table here. This is like the sequence summary table I showed you a few slides back. You can go to our cookbook on our website, bizint.com/cookbook, and see the recipe on how to create these sequence summaries. But when I export to summary records, I chose to have the alignment and the hit structures. And when I include the alignment, I get the complete alignment, one instance of the complete alignment, and I get the hit structure. So you can see here that it's a slightly different way of looking at that amino acid chain. But we can basically do a comprehensive search and find results both ways and combine them together. But probably the most interesting reason to use hit structures, reference rows with hit structure reports, has to do with the indexing of chemical abstracts. When in the classic STN system, there is a limit on the number of structures of registry numbers that can be associated with a family, with a record. And if there is more indexing necessary than that, they will split that CA reference into multiple CA references. And there's something called, they use something called a temporary accession number. And when these get really big, the CAS terminology for this is a megatan, a really large record that's split across multiple records, a family that's split across multiple CA records. Now, what happens when you do a structure search in one of these cases is that you may find that you pick up 1 or 2 hits in one record and a hit in another record and a hit in another record. There can be 20 or more of these equivalent CA plus records. when you have all of these different records together, you need some way of associating them back together. Now, in the default, in BizInt Smart Charts for patents, if you export an example that hits in more than one record, in this case here we have two, you can see the accession numbers are sequential. We have two different structures that hit in the same invention, but in different records. They'll show up as separate records. So you see duplicate references in your index, for example. The solution, though, in reference rows is actually very simple. Simply load the file into BizInt Smart Charts reference rows and export. And the default behavior of BizInt Smart Charts reference rows is to summarize all of those index terms into a single entity. So what you see here is where the accession number field is listed. It's a list of all of the accession numbers that were recovered here, and then a display showing that you have two compounds appearing in one virtual reference. So a couple of things that we're going to be doing down the road. Right now, there aren't a whole lot of options. I'm going to back up one slide here to show you. On the right-hand side, where you see the roles in the notes, right now it's always the roles in the notes. In the index of hit structures, it's always the notes. The order of the labeling of the links, and so forth are all fixed. But this is something that we're working on putting options on. We have a project underway. If you update a report to show you, here are structures that were new, that were newly introduced by the new records that you brought in. So you can see, okay, here's an area that we're surveilling. Here's our known technology. Here are the new structures in the context of our overall report. We are working with a number of our customers to extend this beyond CA Plus and registry. Our first stop will be MARPAT, and a few other targets we're looking at as well beyond that. I mentioned that we are looking at supporting more export formats, and we absolutely are looking at a couple of different ways of presenting the data. Right now, this is only a Word table. I'm not sure how likely this is going to be exported to Excel. We might give it a try. But we absolutely will be doing some HTML and other formats and some other arrangements of the data. One of the first that you will see is the index in conjunction with a chart, with a BizInt Smart Charts table. We're hoping to be able to show hit structures in a table, but one of the big issues is what do you do when you have a lot of them? Currently, BizInt Smart Charts for patents does not put any limits on the number of structures associated with a reference or references associated with a structure. So both the index and the hit structure displays can get quite large. That will really be a problem in the table, and we need to come up with a solution for that. I do think you'll see something in the near future, as well as the option of having limits. So that's what we have for today.